George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
It's the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from Rochdale in Greater Manchester, where this evening everything is happening. And that's the reason for the slight delay in beginning the show this evening. Please forgive me for that. 8 months pregnant, Sundus, in the Nur al-Shams refugee camp in the West Bank of occupied Palestine, was shot and killed today. The Israelis refused to allow medical assistance to reach her, and both her and the unborn child are now dead. May they pass straight to heaven, and may those who killed her and her unborn baby burn in hell for eternity. And there's a split in the American administration about how to bring the Ukraine war to a halt. Apparently, Kellogg's Cornflakes is demanding the resignation of President Putin. Well, good luck with that. We'll be talking about both these issues and much, much more, because this is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Sundus and her 8-month fully formed unborn baby are, of course, only two of the hundreds of thousands of people who have been murdered by Benjamin Netanyahu and his murder gang in Tel Aviv. I highlight them for two reasons. First of all, because it's only just happened in the last few hours, and secondly, because it was in the West Bank. The October 7th incursion, of course, came from Gaza. It had nothing to do with the West Bank. Hamas don't rule the West Bank, and Sundus and her unborn baby definitely had nothing to do with Hamas. And therefore, underscored in this little mass murder in the Holy Land is the obvious point. This did not begin on October the 7th, and this is not about Hamas. There is not an Israel-Hamas war. The media are lying to you about that. They have been lying to you about it all along. I ask you never to forget that the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, claimed on air, in public, to the world, that he had just seen pictures of beheaded babies on October the 7th. It was a gigantic lie, a bright, shining lie. The propagandists who pervade it across the world were lying. The mass media is still lying to you all day, every day. They don't even report, not one single outlet in the mass media in the world has reported what I've just told you about Sundus and her 8-month-old unborn baby. Not one person in the power structures of Western countries will talk about it. They are all engaged in a gigantic lie. This much you know. What you don't know, and I don't know, is why. Why is the entire world political system in the West, why is it so bent and twisted in defense of a genocidal country of 8 million people, millions of whom are third-class citizens with no rights of any kind at all. I've known apartheid, Mr. Elon Musk. I was in apartheid South Africa, undercover for the African National Congress. I gave my blood on the floor of the police station in Gugulethu Township in Cape Town, South Africa. I mean, I literally gave my blood. And I was accompanied every step of the way and under the leadership of brave Jewish fighters against apartheid in South Africa. So don't tell me that Jews are in any way necessarily supporters of apartheid. Because I give you Joe Slovo, I give you Ruth First, I give you Albie Sachs, I give you Dennis Goldberg, I give you Ronnie Castros, I give you Max Coleman, I give you Audrey Coleman, I give you their sons who drove me around. This genocidal apartheid state in Israel is exactly the same in every particular, except it is worse than the apartheid system in South Africa. And I'm not going to stand by while Donald Trump and Elon Musk begin what can only be described as a genocidal attempt to bring down the Republic of South Africa because some guy sang a song about killing farmers, killing Boers. What does that have to do with the government of South Africa? What does that have to do with Cyril Ramaphosa? What does that have to do with the South African coalition government? I'll tell you what it has to do. South Africa was the country that brought the case of genocide against Israel in front of the International Criminal Court, in front of the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world. That's why they've launched a war of words at the moment against South Africa. And only that. It's not because they care about the Boers. Let me be clear. I'm against killing farmers. I'm against killing Boers. I'm against killing whites. Just as much as I was against killing blacks under apartheid in South Africa. Can the critics of South Africa today say the same? Somebody asked me, how do you feel about people killing white farmers in South Africa? I said exactly the same way that I cared and felt about the killing of the black children at Sharpeville, about the killing of the black children in Soweto. How about you? I asked, and answer came there, none. Because they, of course, said nothing against apartheid until it was time for apartheid to be ditched. The United States of America took Nelson Mandela off the international terrorist list in 2008. 18 years after his release from Pollsmoor Prison, later Pollsmoor Hospital. The British and American governments supported apartheid right up until the bitter end. So the last people in the world entitled to talk about South Africa and racism are the British and American governments. Now that I've got that off my chest, let me turn to Ukraine. I've just read in the last few minutes, I was reading it while I was waiting to come on air, about a split which has occurred inside the American government over how they're going to actually implement the election promise that Donald Trump made, that he was going to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. It's the only basis on which people like me preferred him over Kamala Harris. But when does it start, President Trump? Apparently, you spoke with President Putin today. Did you tell him that your special appointee to Ukraine and Russia to bring about the end of the war, did you tell him that he is pushing for the resignation of President Putin? Good luck with that. Do any of you seriously think that the one who's going to resign is President Putin? Seriously? He's the most popular Russian leader since Joseph Stalin in the Second World War. Putin has the support of more than 80% of the Russian people. And the Russians have paid a gigantic price in blood and treasure to liberate their co-religionists, to liberate their Russian compatriots in the eastern part of Ukraine from 10 years of violence and mass murder against them. 14,000 Eastern Ukrainians, Russian people in Eastern Ukraine, trapped there by the vagaries of boundaries in the Soviet period, were systematically reduced. Their children murdered. Their old people slaughtered in their homes. Their trade unionists in Odessa burned to death deliberately in a burning trade union building. Do you think Russia has done all this? Do you think Russia has expended all this in international ostracism, sanctions, treasure, in the hundreds of billions, and the blood of so many of their soldiers and civilians? Do you think Russia's done all this so that Donald Trump can demand the resignation of Vladimir Putin as a condition of bringing about a ceasefire? Let me tell you, if that's your demand, there will be no ceasefire in Ukraine. The war will continue until the Russian armed forces are in the center of Kiev, appointing a government of their own. You said you were the anti-war leader, Donald Trump. You said you'd bring about an end to the war in Gaza, only to declare that you were now the ruler of Gaza and the Palestinians now had to get out and never come back. You said you would bring about an end to the war in Ukraine. And now, these are your demands for a ceasefire, a freezing of the conflict on a North-South Korea basis with British troops policing a demilitarized zone in between them. Are you serious? Do you know the history of Russia and Britain? Have you ever heard of the Crimean War? Have you ever heard of the War of Intervention? Have you ever heard of the 108,000 British soldiers that invaded Russia to reverse the Russian Revolution between 1918 and 1922? Do you know anything about any of these things? Do you think Russia is going to allow British soldiers along the demilitarized zone between Russia and Ukraine? Are you crazy, Donald Trump? I asked this on Wednesday. And I'm genuinely telling you that I'm beginning seriously to question, if not your, then the mental health of the people you have appointed around you to advise you on these two great conflicts of our time. In Gaza, in the West Bank, in Lebanon, with Iran, and of course, the potentially existential conflict in the Ukraine. We'll be talking to a man in a minute that used to be described as the last Arab. Certainly the last Arab journalist. He'd be the first to admit that there are other Arabs and even other Arab journalists. But he's still the doyen of Arabs. He's still the doyen of Arab journalists. He's Abdel Bari Atwan, and he's up right after this short break. Stay tuned.
There's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Gaza, all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
Thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Okay, we've got a poll as always. Will Trump own Gaza? Yes or no? My goodness, 23,775 people have already voted. And the answer is yes or no. And you can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please make sure you subscribe to the channel and give the show the thumbs up and share it with all of your friends and followers on that platform. Will Trump own Gaza? Yes or no? And if you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. If you're in the UK or Ireland, it's also free of charge, 0808 196 5522. And in the rest of the world, which frankly most of you are, is 0044 203 966 2625. Abdel Bari Atwan, writer, commentator, and editor-in-chief of Rai Al-Yom, joins me again on the mother of all talk shows. Abdel Bari, anyone who thought there was a real ceasefire in Gaza has discovered that insofar as there is one, it's a prelude to a plan for the mass total transfer of the population there into the Sinai or God knows where, anywhere but their own land of Palestine, that is for sure. They didn't know that a ceasefire involved the systematic murder of people in the Gaza Strip, and they certainly can't have known that the war effort would simply be transferred from Gaza to the West Bank, where widespread killing by settlers and the armed forces of Netanyahu is now the order of the day. So any joy that we felt the last time we talked about the cessation of all-out war in Gaza has to be brutally tempered by these new facts, does it not?
You know, Brother George, it is a pleasure to be with you again in your very successful show here. You know, the answer, and I believe Trump actually planning to occupy Gaza, to imperialize Gaza, to transfer all 2 million from the Gazan to anywhere, maybe to the moon, because Egypt and Jordan, they refuse to take any refugee from Gaza. So we don't know yet, but he said he will send his troop to invade Gaza, to occupy Gaza, and to kick all the Palestinians out from there. Yeah, this is. I don't know. I would like to ask you and ask your audience, George, which is huge. Why the American hate us? What did we do to the American or to the West as a Palestinian? Why they want to transfer us? Why they want to ethnic cleansing us? Why there is genocide against us? And, we are a very poor, very peaceful people. Staying in the refugee camps for the last 76 years, I am one of them. I'm asking why this Trump actually treating us or treating our Gaza as a, real estate broker, not as the president. And he wants to actually dismiss us from our even refugee place. 85% of Gaza are refugees. They are coming from, from Ashkelon, from Asdod, from Jaffa, from... So they are there in the refugee camps for the last 76 years. And now he wants them to be refugee again, where we don't know. Until now, we don't know. So this is the question. This is the biggest question. Gaza now is a grave. You used to say, George, on all your programs that, Gaza is the biggest open air prison. Now we are open air grave. About 65,000 Palestinians or Gazan were massacred by the Israeli bombardment. And, at least 30,000 of them are children, babies. We don't have hospital in Gaza. They destroyed all hospitals and people suffered. So now, he wants to turn Gaza as a Riviera of the Middle East. We don't want Gaza to be a Riviera of the Middle East. We want to have Gaza peaceful. We want Gaza to be Hanoi if the Americans send their troops to Gaza. Hanoi to liberate every inch of Palestine and to list us as a refugee to go back to our, towns in the occupied Israel, occupied Palestine. So this is the question. Why they hate us? Why he doesn't want us to be like everybody? Why he wants us to have a happy life outside Gaza and outside Palestine? If he is serious, he should actually put pressure on the Israeli and actually take our side and send us back to our towns inside Israel. This is our town, and there we will be the happiest people on earth. And why, for example, did the American actually, kicked out the German, the British, the Russian from their cities when they were destroyed by the Nazi in the Second World War? No. Why he wants to apply this only on us in Gaza? I am really puzzled. I can't understand the West. I am living here for 40 years. I don't understand the Western mentality. And people are supporting, or some people in the West, supporting this kind of genocide, this kind of transfer, this kind of ethnic cleansing.
I don't understand it either, so I can't answer your question. What I do know is that, as you say, Egypt and Jordan have refused, and there are many reasons why they have refused, but one of the main ones is that their political systems would collapse if they were to agree to it. And now, presumably, Trump will levy some kind of penalty against Egypt and Jordan for their refusal. Netanyahu said, imagine the gall of this, Netanyahu said, Saudi Arabia has lots of land, let's send the Palestinians there, to the deserts of Saudi Arabia. And of course that's been treated with exactly the same contempt. MBS, not my favorite person, or yours, I'm sure, but this evening he said, the Palestinians are not immigrants in Palestine that can be asked to leave. This is their land. They're on their land. How can you kick out people from their land and expect other people to take them? Millions of them. Merely transferring the conflict, of course, because the resistance would still be in existence if they transferred them anywhere, and Israel would soon be at war with them there. So Nobody's going to take them. Hampshire isn't going to take them. New Hampshire isn't going to take them. They're not going to be allowed back to Jaffa or Haifa. They're not going to be allowed to the Galilee. They're not going to be camping in luxury glamps in Netanya. They're not going back to Palestine. They're not going to Europe or America or anywhere in the Middle East. So where does that leave us? We're now in an absolute stalemate, aren't we?
You know, it leaves us and actually to turn the whole of the Middle East in anarchy and armed anarchy. And, you know, to go back to the 70s or 80s when they actually, the Palestinians turned to so-called terrorism. This is the problem. He is pushing the Middle East for complete anarchy. Why he is actually, as you mentioned, why he is, you know, trying to transfer people from their land. They are immigrants. I admit they are. I am immigrants because, you know, our country, our real country, you know, is Jaffa and Jaffa and Tel Aviv and Safad and everywhere, and you know, everywhere in Gaza. So this is, if he is really the leader of the free world, if he believes in the values of human rights, you know, he should actually take our side. He should say that to the Israeli, enough is enough. But he has actually, I don't know, he wants to enlarge Israel. He said several times that Israel is a very small country and we have to enlarge it. It means to annex the West Bank. It means to kick out or transfer all the people, all the people, Palestinian in the West Bank and now in Gaza, and also have, you know, most of Syria, most of Lebanon, most of part of Egypt and part of Saudi Arabia and Iraq also. Why he is actually supporting this kind of actually assault on other people's land? Why he is only thinking about the Arab words and want us to suffer again? Yeah, it's unbelievable, honestly. Yeah, I think, you know, this is very dangerous here. You know, now he wants Gaza for the Israeli settlers. He wants Gaza as a real estate opportunity in order to enlarge his actually banks, his money in his banks, and also to give a huge present to his brother-in-law Kushner, who is actually also again a real estate broker. This is the problem. He's thinking of himself. And again, why he should or the Israeli should establish independent Palestinian state in Saudi Arabia. There are the Security Council resolutions talking about two state solution, a Palestinian state, independent state, and an Israeli state. So why they don't respect the international law? Why they are coming in the end against the Palestinian? This is the problem. But Palestinians are deeply rooted on their territories. They are not going to be actually removed from Gaza. And they are willing to die than leaving their country, leaving their refugee camps, even though they are sticking to the refugee camps, sticking to the refugee houses. Now it's sticking to the rubble. You know, thousands of, tens of thousands of Palestinians, moved from south of Gaza to the north of Gaza. And what they find, why they are walking for 40 kilometers to go to the north of Gaza. They are going to the rubble. They want to build their tents on the rubble. Said, we want to live and die here. And, you know, somebody like Trump, he doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand the humanity at all. But just he wants to root out people, just to enlarge Israel and add next more territories to it, and to make the Israeli happy. Why he should do that? You know, I'm really, where are the American people? Where is the Western people? Where are the European people? Why they don't say to him, enough is enough? You know, this, you are endangering our security as European. We are neighbors to the Arabs. And, you know, the Arabs wouldn't be all the time like this. Maybe they are weak now. Some of them are living on the American aids, financial aids. But even no single Arab country said we will take the Palestinian or the Gazan to our territories. And it means that, you know, we are heading toward maybe more terrorism, more war. People are frustrated. People are humiliated. So if this makes Trump happy, I think, you know, he will make the whole world miserable because of this kind of policies.
What will happen now with the second phase of the ceasefire. There are rumors that Netanyahu wants to collapse it now because he didn't fancy the PR impact of the release of healthy Israeli captives and having to release in exchange considerably more Palestinian captives. What's likely to happen? Will there be a second stage of the ceasefire?
George, Netanyahu did not accomplish any of his aims in Gaza. He did not destroy Hamas as he promised. He did not actually achieve the biggest history or the biggest victory he was aiming at in Gaza. And also he did not succeed to actually frighten, terrorizing the Gazan people to leave Gaza Strip. They stick to their territories and they are not going to move from there. So now his aim is actually to relieve the pressure on him from the captive families. Now he managed to release at least, now maybe 15 or 20 of them. So he wouldn't go to the second phase at all. Second phase, it means a ceasefire forever, a permanent ceasefire. A permanent Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. I don't think he will stick. I don't think he will go to the second phase at all. I think he will start the war, like exactly what happened in Lebanon. He accepted the ceasefire in Lebanon, but after two months, which is the agenda, he started about 1,500 violation of this ceasefire, and still occupying the south of Lebanon. So the same experience will be repeated in Gaza. After he released some of the captive or the Israeli soldiers and women, and after he released all this, I think after that he will say maybe the Palestinians did this, the Palestinians did that. He will find a lot of excuses, and he doesn't need excuses to resume the war. And the third stage is the reconstruction. And I don't believe this reconstruction will start it, whether with the help of Trump or the agreement of Netanyahu. We know in 2014, the Israeli destroyed about 100,000 houses of Gaza. And we had a summit on Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, and they actually put about $5 billion to reconstruct Gaza. It never happened. It never happened again. Even all these talks about reconstruction in Gaza is actually just to buy time and to make the Palestinian people very miserable. This is the situation. I don't believe there is two stages, stage 2 or stage 3. I think that Netanyahu will come back to war until he said, we want the hostages, but we don't want the Gaza Strip ruled by Hamas. As long as Hamas is there, and Hamas is deeply rooted among the Palestinian people there, among the Gazan people. So I believe, or I predict, that the war will come again, and genocide will continue in Gaza, hoping that they can actually kill as much as they can from the Gazan people, disarmed Gazan people. This is the future as I see it here from London.
Now, finally, we both know Lebanon very well, although the Lebanon that we can see today bears little resemblance to the Lebanon of the past. The new president of Lebanon shook hands with the American envoy, who was wearing the Israeli emblem, the Star of David, on her ring deliberately for the photographs. So the new president of Lebanon is shaking hands with Israel, metaphorically speaking. In front of him, she thanked Israel for what she said, defeating the resistance in Lebanon. They've got a prime minister in waiting who shares the same perspective as the new president. And all of them say that Hezbollah, which represents at least 30% of the electorate in Lebanon, is not welcome in the Lebanese government when it's been a part of the Lebanese government for decades. What future do you see for Lebanon? Are they headed for war too?
Yes, they are heading toward war, and the Americans are pushing them to that. The Israeli, by violating this ceasefire, they are trying actually to ignite the war in Lebanon again. This envoy supposed to be actually neutral, at least. It has interfered in all the internal matters of Lebanon. They were interfering how to set or to build the new government in Lebanon. They actually put vetoes on certain names, and as you said, she was wearing the ring with the Israeli or the Jewish star there on it. And imagine that, there is no moral at all. She's supposed to be disciplined, not to actually provoke the people there, and to say, as you mentioned, that they don't want a third of the Lebanese people to be represented on the new government. Hezbollah did a lot of, the good things in order to make this ceasefire, working. They were very, very cooperative with the government and also with the American who were running the show in Lebanon. And now they are rewarding them because of their actually help to the ceasefire, with accepting the ceasefire. Even, they did not actually provoke the Israeli or actually answer back when the Israeli bombed their cities or bombed their actually civilian. So, and instead of encouraging Hezbollah to be moderate, to continue his actually moderation and cooperation with the government, with the new president, now they said they should not the Hezbollah should not be represented on this new government. This is again a transfer. This is again, a destruction. This is again, canceling, a third of the population of Lebanon completely, and they want to root them maybe in the coming future. What will happen in Gaza, if it happens, it will be repeated literally on Lebanon. Now they want to finish Hamas, to kick Hamas out, and to kill as much as they can of the Palestinians, and the same thing will be applied to Lebanon. They want to root out Hezbollah completely, even if they turn to a peaceful party, if they turn to a very, very active on the government as a political party, not as resistance groups in Lebanon. So this is the problem. The American is supporting the Israeli. So you can see, this American envoy are insulting, humiliating the Lebanese people, and very, very, very provocative, and blackmailing them, and very arrogant. And I'm surprised why, the new Lebanese president and the Speaker of the Parliament and also the new Prime Minister, why they sit with her. They should kick her out from Lebanon. Said, you are not acceptable in our territory. You are creating some sort of a disaster division. You want to create a war, a civil war in Lebanon. This is what she is trying to do. That's the problem. So I wrote in my newspaper, I said, she shouldn't be actually in Lebanon. She shouldn't be received by the new government, Lebanese government, or Lebanese president. This is the problem. And they should actually say to her, we don't talk to you unless you force the Israeli to respect the ceasefire, all the ceasefire points. Otherwise, we don't want you anymore, and you have to suffer. And the resistance is there, and it will come back. And because of this American provocation, American humiliation of the Lebanese people.
Abdel Bari Atwan, thanks for joining us, as ever, on the mother of all talk shows. Much obliged to you. Now, we have a poll running. Will Trump own Gaza? 25,000 people have voted now. Yes or no? Will Trump own Gaza? Yes or no? Quick break, then your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, the poll is really big now, and the answer is overwhelmingly that Trump will never own Gaza. Let's say a big thank you to this week's top donors who visited our new MOATS.tv website. It's easily the quickest and easiest and most sanction-free and commission-free way of supporting the show. And we're deeply grateful to Arash Shojail, Mamoun Rashid, Ibrar Mohammed, Francis McCaffrey, and Darren Alevi. And Dorothea, although I can't read her second name, I'll get that back up. Please do become a MOATS donor tonight and give what you can to keep the show going. It is easy, as I say, on our new website, MOATS.tv. We'll be taking your calls up to the hour, and then we'll be interviewing the Ukrainian Journalist of the Year 2024. I promise you, you'll definitely want to meet her. Now, let me see where I am. You can leave comments, of course, on YouTube. Just scan the QR code now and leave a comment on the YouTube stream. As Bob Cosmic has, Zionism is terrible, be it Israeli Zionism or Christian Zionism. It's a poison that destroys everything it comes into contact with. And Daniel Joliffe says it goes back to what you said in your epic interview in 2006, and I've just lost the text of that. But Daniel, thanks. I think I got your point. Let's go to the first call. I'm having technical difficulties, as you can see. First call is from Glasgow, my old stamping ground, where Sarkar, who's a legend of the show, wants to talk about Keir Starmer. Go ahead, Sarkar.
Good evening, George. Thank you so much. Always nice to talk to you. It's always a breath of fresh air. George, I'll be honest, I've got a 2-year-old kid who builds castles with paper cups. When they fall, believe me, they fall easily. But the way Keir Starmer's ministers have been falling, whether it's a Tulip Siddiq, he will be going very soon because he got caught breaking lockdown rules, learning acting voiceover coach. Then there's this transport secretary who got fired a few months ago. The rate at which this is going, I'll be honest, they'll be falling much more quicker than the castles my boy builds with the paper cups. And today, not today, actually yesterday, the messages by Andrew Gwynn, which the media are calling a leak. Correct me if I'm wrong, George, and I'm happy to be corrected by you. I don't think it's a leak. I think it's a reflection of Labour. And correct me if I'm wrong, George, if you say call it a reflection of Labour. Labour is not the party of Tony Benn. Is not the party of Barbara Castle. This Labour Party is the party of Tony Blair since 1997. This Labour Party has sacked people like Jeremy Corbyn, insulted people like Dan Abbott. Mandelson, who was kicked out by the Labour Party, was brought back in, and we all know how honestly how respectably he's being treated by Americans. They're not even giving him the due for being the American ambassador. This leak by Andrew Gwynn clearly shows reflection of the Labour Party, how much they hate the working class. They're so much scared, they want to cancel the local elections using a veneer of some other realignment or something like that. George, I personally think, like your predictions have been bang on since 2001, I personally think Keir Starmer won't be lasting till summer 2029. I think he'll be gone much more sooner than that. But the way I see it, George, if this rate keeps continuing, I don't know, George, what's the other alternative for Britain? And the messages which have been, I won't say leaked, but reflected, the state of mind of Labour, where does this leave the common working class people to look up to? Because I'm very disgusted what's going on, George. I'd like to hear your views.
Well, I couldn't put it better than you did. You summarized exactly the situation. I don't want, for reasons which will be obvious to you at least, to say too much about Andrew Gwynn, who presumably is now considering his position as a member of Parliament. For those overseas, Andrew Gwynn is a key ally of Keir Starmer. He is a prominent member of the Labour Friends of Israel, and he has been revealed in his WhatsApp messages, which have been given to the Mail on Sunday, to be guilty of every kind of wickedness that it is possible to imagine. Let me just count the ways. Despite being a prominent member and fanatic supporter of the Labour Friends of Israel, he turns out to be anti-Semitic. He's got anti-Semitic remark after remark after remark after remark in his WhatsApp messages to one other MP and several important Labour councillors in the city of Manchester. He smears his own deputy leader. Because there's children watching, including my own, I don't want to say what he said about his own deputy leader, Angela Rayner. Let's just summarize it thus. One of Starmer's top ministers is describing his own deputy leader, Angela Rayner, as a woman of low repute. He's an aching, politically correct, right-on liberal who writes about his fellow Labour MP, Diane Abbott, in rabid, anti-black, racist phrases. In his own hand, on his own WhatsApp, with another MP and several top Labour councillors. This aching liberal, who's an anti-Semite, who's an anti-black racist, then goes on to wish death on his own constituents who are old age pensioners complaining about their lot under Labour. This is the Labour that took a deliberate decision to freeze tens of thousands of British old age pensioners to death by withdrawing their winter fuel allowance so that they could give the money to Zelensky in Ukraine. In the same week, the very next day, they cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, though their own study showed that scores of thousands of pensioners would die as a result. The next day, they gave that money and more to Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine. But they've gone a step further. Now they are wishing death on any old age pensioner who dares to complain about the lot that they have inherited from this so-called Labour government. So this man, Andrew Gwynn, when the newspapers last night, first editions, hit the press, was immediately sacked as Britain's health minister, and he was suspended from the Labour Party. And feverish speculation exists where I am right now in Greater Manchester that this evening he will be forced to resign from Parliament and cause a by-election. You'll understand why I don't want to say too much more about that at this point. So Daniel Joliffe's comment, which was cut off, says they believe Israel blood is more valuable than the blood of Palestinians. It's sad. Yeah, I mean, more valuable to the power of hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians' lives. Waderick says, even in my most drunken stupor, I couldn't design two such disastrous foreign policy strategies essentially simultaneously. You're right, man. Jack Klugman, great name, says the Zion evangelical troglodytes are a big problem here in the US. It's why the South sucks. And EM says Ronald Reagan was kinder to Palestine than Trump. He was so right-wing, but he had more compassion than Trump has. Let's go to Florida on that very subject and talk with Raz. Go ahead, Raz.
Hello, George. How are you doing? How are you? Thank you for having me.
Welcome, brother. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to preface it with I don't think my popular, and a little bit boring, but for me, this is kind of like the NAPCA, where Palestinians, the catastrophe, basically the ethnic cleansing of 48. If you remember, the pre-British mandate of Palestine in 1917 had, over 95% Palestinians in that territory. By 1995, Jewish control with the Oslo Accords, is almost absolute, where Palestinians are basically given, the center, least valuable land, and all the best, most valuable land is sort of invaded by Israelis. Frankly, I say this with a heavy heart, a hammer in my heart, if you will, but it is a military occupation. And because the conflict is, to me, really decades long, as a person who does practice, some faiths, we have 613 commandments, but really what most Jewish people don't realize, commentary, the Torah is our 5 holy books. 600 of the 613, only 411 viewed as applying today, and some of them are circumstantial, like you cannot, for example, be late fulfilling a vow. That only applies if you're making a vow. But what's really interesting is of those, only 244 apply outside of Israel. So only 26, to be honest, actually apply in Israel. So for most Jews, mitzvot applies. And so what I'm saying is basically in a nutshell, the most important thing, this is really where it bothers me a lot. Negative mitzvahs, which is the most important one is the 7th one to me, which is not to hand over any children to Moloch. So basically, it doesn't say only Jewish children. It says any children. So I heard the previous caller, or I'm sorry, I was listening to your show. I got so shaken by this news. 30,000 deaths. I think it was your guest that mentioned that, of children. Yeah. I am so disturbed by this statement. It's a transgression of fundamental principalities of our commandments. And, I find that very sad. So I just wanted to share that information. Unfortunately, it seems like it's a conflict. Again, I don't mean to bore you and your callers too much with too much history.
Well, I'm very glad that you made the call, and I'm very glad that you said what you said. And it's particularly significant coming from you as a person of the Jewish faith. And it goes without saying, I hope, but I'll say it anyway, our animus is not remotely towards Jewish people or Judaism. We respect Jewish people. We respect their faith. But we will not accept Zionism. We will not accept the usurping of a people and the destruction of their country and the cascading of them to the 4 corners of the earth as refugees in perpetuity. What that has to do with Judaism is very difficult for me to work out. I would have thought the very opposite. Having, they say, suffered exile, you'd think the last thing that they would be into was sending others into exile. Having themselves, they say, been marched into the desert, you'd think the last thing they would want to do is march others into the desert. And having suffered, as they undoubtedly did in the fascist period, a genocidal holocaust which systematically sought to eliminate all Jews from the earth, you'd think they'd be the last people to be involved in a genocidal holocaust against others. Raz in Florida, I'm grateful for your call. We had a big week on the podcast. We're now in the top 30 in China and Russia, in the top 10 in Morocco. Now you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code in the corner of your screen now. But you can also listen to the podcast via our new website, the moats.tv website. Let me take a quick break, and then it's the Ukrainian Journalist of the Year. I'm not joking. Stay tuned.
The 1897 edition of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, read by George Galloway, available only on Patreon.
The cylinder was artificial, hollow, with an end that screwed out. Something within the cylinder was unscrewing the top. Good heavens, said Ogilvy. There's a man in it, men in it, half roasted to death, trying to escape. At once, with a quick mental leap, he linked the thing with the flash on Mars. The thought of the confined creature was so dreadful to him that he forgot the heat and went forward to the cylinder to help turn. But luckily, the dull radiation arrested him before he could burn his hands on the still glowing metal.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Diana Panchenko was the Ukrainian Journalist of the Year until Zelensky, in the name of freedom, liberty, and freedom of speech, turned against her, put her on a hit list, put her on a death list, blacklisted her, and began to see if he could push her out of the country, see if he could push her out of public life altogether. This is the top Ukrainian broadcaster and journalist of the year 2024. So earlier, I interviewed her, and I started by asking her about the astounding revelations about USAID, which showed that 95% of all journalism and broadcasting in Ukraine was paid for by the United States government of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Free press, anyone? Anyway, I asked her, this is what she said.
Oh, George, thank you for invitation. На самом деле, все, что сейчас происходит,
Well, George, I would say everything that is happening right now in front of our eyes reminds me of a novel by George Orwell. And I remember him saying that if you can claim that 2 + 2 = 4, that means you're free. Well, I would say over all those years, Ukraine was never free. We could never claim that 2 + 2 = 4. I'm very grateful to you, George. I'm so grateful for what you do, for not shying away to convey the truth to what is happening everywhere around the world, and specifically, among others, in Ukraine. The official media is trying to persuade the world that Ukrainians are fighting for freedom, but that is the biggest lie about this war, because there is nothing that would be truth. And the outstanding example of that, if I may say a few words about myself, I was born in Ukraine. I started there for more than 15 years. I worked in Ukrainian media, and I always called for peace. I always called for negotiations with all the neighbors. And as a result, Zelensky introduced personal sanctions against me, and there are 2 criminal cases opened against me, and I'm facing the risk of life sentence in Ukraine. I've been attacked repeatedly. I was attacked with a machine gun. Have you ever heard that some journalists who are being financed and supported by US aid are being assaulted? And this is happening. Many of my colleagues, former colleagues, are in prison today. Nobody's talking about that. And the issue on how US aid affected the situation that today Ukraine is virtually destroyed is so big that I could talk about this topic for hours. But if I was to focus on the main thing, I would say that over all those years, the people who were calling themselves the measure of true democracy and moral values were actual killers and assassins by destroying physically or morally people who were speaking for truth. In the very first days of war, Ruch Chesna, an organization sponsored by USAID, called me the so-called traitor of Ukraine and included me in a list of the so-called traitors of Ukraine. They just labeled a sticker on me, traitor. And afterwards, all of this information was published by numerous media. People were told that I'm a traitor. People were trying to turn the whole country against me. And there are many other journalists like me. And today we find out that all those people were acting based on the instructions of USAID, and they were financed by USAID. So there is nothing about freedom or democracy. We find out some horrendous truth that consortium of non-commercial organizations was also financed by USAID, and it presented a whole number of criteria to Zelensky that he had to be guided by his actions. One of the most important criteria was a direct prohibition to start peace talks. He was prohibited to hold a referendum regarding the potential peace with Russia. So Ukraine had only one option, to participate in a war where the situation was so biased. And we see what is the outcome right now. Men are being caught on the streets of Ukraine and sent directly to the front line. The apartments are being destroyed because law enforcement officers come into the apartment by breaking in through the door and taking out all the men and taking them directly to the front line. And anyone who would dare or who has dared to say that's not the right approach, we need peace talks at any cost, we need to stop this war, all of the people who think that are going to prison, are being tortured, or are facing sanctions just like I did. There are criminal cases opened against them. I had to bring a lot of sacrifices to be able to speak truth. I had to leave Ukraine. I was lucky to be able to leave Ukraine until it was too late, to be able to convey my truth to the rest of the world. And many Ukrainians are following my coverage today. Up until recently, Ukrainian people was hostage to Zelensky and other people financed through USAID. They are still hostages of Zelensky today because only Zelensky is the major hurdle to peace today.
Diana, you were the Journalist of the Year in 2024, and I promise you, you will be the Journalist of the Year in Ukraine again. These are the last days of this disastrous era of the post-2014 coup d'etat against the whole people of Ukraine, not just the people in the eastern part of the country. Because, as you say, the Zelensky regime, as it is now, is involved in wholesale war, not only with Russia, but with its own people, its own civil society, its own uncorrupted civil society, against the Orthodox Church in its own country. And people are voting with their feet, aren't they? Millions of Ukrainians have fled the country. They are not ready to die for Zelensky. Surely this is the last year of all of this.
Well, I really like to hope so, George. And we genuinely hope that this is the last year. We are praying for it because the things that are happening in Ukraine right now are horrendous. You mentioned the war against Orthodox Church. Just lately, I received an email from one of the priests. He was a priest in Ukraine. He was forcefully sent to Ukraine, although it is against his beliefs. And he is being tortured and abused there. He sent me an email saying that other soldiers soldiers, tie him to a piece of wood, forcing him to run around with a huge bulk of wood tied to his back. This is awful, and all we have to do is just hope for a change, for a better. Well, frankly speaking, I would say I'm very cautious in making forecasts and making guesses whether the war could potentially come to an end this year, to say the least, because right now I do not see any prerequisites showing that the parties who are in the negotiations right now, primarily the United States and Russia, could potentially hear one another. I'm not quite certain that as of today the United States are able to hear and listen to Russia in a way that Russia would definitely want to see an independent foreign policy of its own, because during this war we have heard a lot of terrible facts that has come to the light, and it turned out that everything that I was talking about on the channel where I used to work in Ukraine for the last 15 years turned out to be the truth. We were conveying one simple statement: we must not play with fire, we must not play with war, we must not risk joining NATO. It's a clear risk of war. It was so simple, it was so obvious, and this is exactly what has happened. And right now we know that in Ukraine there were more than 12 bases of the CIA in Ukraine, that Ukraine was pumped with weapons during all that time, and in parallel Ukrainian society was facing all the propaganda to incite hatred against Russia, although over all those years Russia and Ukraine were considered to be friendly, brotherly countries. And today we hear Zelensky saying all the terrible things. Frankly speaking, I genuinely tend to think that he has gone mad completely. It's not an adequate state, and he claims, okay, if you're not ready to accept us to NATO, give us nuclear weapon. Just think of it. What is the level of potential damage that can be caused through that? And this person, Zelensky, is still the leader of Ukraine, and he's brought this country to an edge of extinction. Ukraine has twice as little population as it used to have when he became president. It used to be 40 million population country when he joined the post of president, and now it's only 20 million. So Zelensky claims either Ukraine becomes member of NATO or a nuclear power. This is a no-go, and that only motivates Russia to further aggression. As of today, I would be very careful in my assessments, because I'm not entirely confident that the West would be ready to listen to what Russia has to say in terms of the security assurances and security of Russian borders, and the West is not ready to understand that both Russian people and Ukrainian people want peace. And in order for Ukraine to live in peace, all we had to do is act as a bridge between Europe and Russia, between Germany and Russia. We could have used our geographical position to a great advantage. It's a great advantage indeed in terms of logistics, in terms of the ties we've had with Russia and Europe. We could have had a great life, and instead we've been imposed with this war, and we see the terrible role that USA played in that. We were persuaded that we need to become the front line of the West, the missile that is supposed to be a shield, a protection for the West against Russia. But we were a trampoline in a way that was used to destroy Russia. Now it's obvious that the West has lost in this war, and Biden has definitely lost in this war. That's obvious now. So all we can do today is just hope. But what I'd like to say, and what I'd like to convey to your audiences, George, as well, please don't believe it if you hear that Ukrainians want the war to be continued. Well, the most representative footage is what you can see as Ukrainian men are being forcefully caught on the street and sent to war. People die every single day because they're being tortured and beaten to death and sent to war. More than 100 people died trying to flee the country. They drowned in a river, they were killed, they were shot dead. Those are terrible facts, but that's the world we live in today.
Yeah, and yet Zelensky insists that 45,000 is the death toll to date of Ukrainian soldiers, which is itself, of course, a horrific number. But most people believe that it's not even 1/10 of the truth, maybe a 20th of the truth. What's your best estimate on what the losses of Ukrainian men have been in this war?
George, unfortunately, maybe that will sound cynical, but unfortunately, this number is indeed getting close to 1 million. And the amount of losses that we're talking about today are truly gigantic. It's a tragedy. And the absolutely certain data is that more than 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers fled. 45,000 victims that Zelensky names is yet another fact proving that he has gone mad, and he's a president of a country where not a single citizen of Ukraine trusts him. Just look at all the awful graveyards in Ukraine, and they're getting bigger and bigger every single day, and there is more and more of them. This is awful. I don't have the most accurate number, but my guess would be that we can more or less trust the data that we see on Ukraine being mentioned by Donald Trump, and I would say that this can't be any less than 1 million, to say the least. And I constantly receive letters and emails from soldiers from both sides, from Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, and I increasingly receive a lot of letters from Ukrainian military, and they ask for advice. They ask me how they can get out of this hell. They write to me telling that they don't want to participate in this war. They don't want to kill people who have nothing to share and have nothing to argue about. They understand it's not a war for freedom because there is no freedom in Ukraine. And those people are asking for advice, and the only advice I can give them, and this is what I wanted to tell them, is to make their own choice. Choose not hatred. You must not hate Russian people. We have to stop it. And by saying stop this hatred, I talk about both Russia and Ukraine. And in Ukraine, this hatred was incited through official state policy in the course of the last 30 years. And Zelensky is doing that intentionally. He intentionally has thrown all of his effort to make sure Ukrainians hate one another, they hate Russians, so there is so much hatred in our hearts, and this is what propels this war forward. So the only thing I could tell to all the people who are experiencing this terrible, terrible war is please put an end to this hatred. Choose kindness in your heart, no matter how hard it can be.
The mineral wealth of Ukraine has been requested by President Trump as payment for everything that the United States has done for your country, which is a very strange way of putting it. But isn't it the case that the vast majority of the undoubted mineral wealth of Ukraine is in the east of the country and is likely to, whatever the final settlement, never be Ukrainian again and never will be subject to trade with Donald Trump? He's lost that particular wish, hasn't he?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, George. And indeed, the largest mineral resources and reserves are in the territory of Donbass, and primarily the territories that are already controlled by Russia. Right now, there is also conversation going on about the region of Dnipropetrovsk. This is where there are also trillions of US dollars of mineral resources. And this is very clear that if this war is not coming to an end this year, then most probably Russia would also be able to start further attacks onto Dnipropetrovsk region. The front line is getting closer and closer to this region. The city of Pavlograd, this is where I spent my whole childhood. They can hear the gunshots from there. And I can imagine your audience is listening to me right now, George. They may think that it sounds crazy, but Ukraine voluntarily refused from a gas pipeline that was bringing Ukraine billions of US dollars a year for gas transit, but Ukraine said, no, we are not going to transport Russian gas to Europe. All we had to do is to sit on this gas pipeline and benefit from our favorable geographical location. But Ukraine said, no, we don't want to benefit from Russian gas. Instead, we choose to die, and we choose to give over our own mineral resources to Donald Trump. Just think of it, how absurd it is. Ukraine was persuaded this is an okay trade-off. And lately, we see that Ukraine has been witnessing an uprising of a nationalist movement. I'm sure you know about it. And many nationalists who are at the front line today were claiming during all those years that Ukraine has to be independent from Russia, from West. And today, the very same people are saying, yeah, it's okay to provide all those mineral resources to the USA so that we can continue dying in this war. That's the deal that is on the table. I could call it a deal with the devil, because you give out everything you have in order to continue sacrificing lives of Ukrainian men. On the other hand, I can very well understand the position of President Trump and his team. It is all facing huge level of corruption created by Zelensky. And the tragedy is, George, I can't even name the specific numbers. Could we have potentially imagined that we would hear that we know where $100 million were spent that the United States was sending to Ukraine? Based on the information I have, the Ukrainian ports of Odessa, there were tankers of cash used to embezzle and steal cash that US and the West were providing to Ukraine as aid. And this is just the amount of money that Zelensky was making, also as by taking bribes from Ukrainians who wanted to flee the country in order not to be conscripted to the army. According to the current legislations, men are not allowed to leave Ukraine. But those who have a lot of money can afford to. As of today, it can cost them starting from 20 up to 40,000 US dollars. That's the bribe they pay in order to be able to leave Ukraine. And 2 billion US dollars alone were made by Zelensky on those bribes, because his people were allowing some Ukrainian men to flee the country. This is a colossal amount of corruption. And of course, President Trump is very dedicated in getting what was spent there. But most importantly, Ukrainian people never had to benefit from that. And now when US aid is leaving Ukraine, they're no longer capable of providing treatment for patients who have TB. Can you imagine, in the 21st century, Ukraine is going through the pandemic of tuberculosis? How can that happen? That's not 15th century. And Ukraine is facing this pandemic of TB today. Our economy is in shatters. Ukraine can't take care of its citizens anymore. And the only way to survive is to understand that we need peace urgently. We needed it yesterday, not even today, because Ukraine is no longer capable of functioning on its own. It hurts me to say that, but the state of affairs is truly dramatic.
It is strange that there's not more pressure in Kiev for an end to the whole thing. Not only is Russia advancing in the war on the ground at really quite a pace now, not only are so many Ukrainian men dead or mutilated, wounded, and running away, surrendering, but in the neighboring countries, there is an increased chatter about territorial claims that they have against the state of Ukraine. I was in Romania, for example, last week, and there are a lot of people there who believe that they are entitled to territory that was given by the former Soviet Union to Ukraine, but properly belongs to them. You must be well aware that the city of Lvov in the far west of Ukraine considers itself, and certainly the Polish government consider this territory to be Polish. The Hungarians have territorial claims against Ukraine. If Zelensky doesn't hurry up, there won't be any Ukraine left to reconstitute after the war.
Да, Джордж, и тут самый большой
Yes,
парадокс.
George. This is the biggest paradox. The only assurance of security that could be there was Russia, and that's the huge tragedy that we have experienced. If Ukraine could simply continue peacefully trading with all of its neighbors, developing its economy, Ukraine would be able to survive and flourish. It can't be done any other way. That's the strict laws of geopolitics. You don't need to be an expert to understand that. Only Russia alone would be able to provide that kind of security assurance. And undoubtedly, everything that you've just mentioned is true. Poland has always had territorial claims. Maybe it wasn't always that vocal as it is today, but look at the relations between Ukraine and Poland right now. Look at the way that Ukrainians are treated in Poland. And many Polish people indeed believe that Lvov is a Polish city, not a Ukrainian one. That is really the case. And all I can say is that one could think, is Zelensky a secret agent of Russia? Maybe. Just think of it. Zelensky destroyed Ukrainian economy, reduced Ukrainian population by twofold, and he basically contributed to the fact that now Russia has control of Ukrainian territory that are so rich in rare earth metals and minerals. You probably know that Zelensky lived in Moscow for quite a long while when he was a movie star, a comedian, a stand-up comedian. He lived in Moscow for more than 8 years. Based on the information I have, he still has a Russian passport. And if we are to look at his nearest circle, Mr. Yermak has always been quite close to Russia. He has a lot of relatives in Russia, and also the information that is quite reliable confirms that one of the advisors of Zelensky, that is Mikhail Podolyak, also has a brother who has worked in the Russian intelligence. So judge for yourself, who are those people and in whose interest they may be acting. Probably they are true destroyers of Ukraine. So whether Zelensky is a Russian agent, well, I believe very certainly he could be considered one. He can no longer be taken seriously.
Well, he's definitely a double agent in that case, because he's also made a very large sum of money from the United States under the Biden regime. Diana, you're a superstar. I can't wait to meet you one day in Odessa, perhaps my favorite city in your country. It's been wonderful talking to you tonight. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows.
Спасибо большое, Джордж.
Thank you, George. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for all the work you do.
Pretty impressive, I think you'll agree. Diana Panchenko, former Journalist of the Year. I mistakenly said in 2024. In fact, it was in 2020. But she will be Journalist of the Year again. Will Trump own Gaza? 26,665 people have voted. On Telegram, 9% say yes. On X, which is always the case nowadays, 15% say yes. On the YouTube community poll, 11%. On the YouTube stream, 11%. Whilst 91%, 85%, 89% and 89% say no. So not many people believe you're going to get your hands on the Gaza Strip, President Trump. Let's go to the United States, again to Florida, where Grant wants to talk about Ukraine. Grant, welcome to the show. What would you like to say? Grant, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, the whole world's listening. Go ahead.
All right, so it seems to me as I look at television, I look like I'm looking back in the past. I think this so-called, I use the term swastika / the American flag flies in this country because everybody knows America loves the Nazis and their salutes. Okay? When Russia was moving their ships of the Cuban Missile Crisis into Cuba, the same America, Yankee go wherever they want to go, they told Russia, you don't put nothing in our backyard. Same shit that's going on in this war where this is too close. Or they could have gotten along good as long as they didn't use NATO to install nuclear weapons in their border, and it was coming. America wanted that. They wanted to control the whole damn world. They followed England, they followed France, they followed everyone, even from the Roman Empire down. Everything is devour and conquer everything they owned. I am so sick of this place. It's so easy. If we could get rid of all the goddamn flags and live at one race. You know, I'll give you an example, and I'll make it short. Lady gets on the counter, and she says, on stage, she says, those that are black, raise their hands. They raise their hands. Those that are white, raise their hands. Okay? Those that are brown, raise their hands. You know what the next one was? Those who are the human race, raise their hands. You know, the whole audience had their hands up. But when you say the human race, that is not recognized. Color was created by psychotic people to separate us from working together. End of story. That's what I want to bring across. You're doing a great thing by putting out these things. But the human Mr. Crisis.
Thank you, Grant. Yeah. Grant, thanks for very pungently putting that point. I love America. I love the American people. Gayatri and I will be there several times, I think, God willing, this year. We'll be speaking in many different places, starting in Michigan and in Chicago and in Anaheim, outside Los Angeles. These will be the first 3 dates. It will be in September of this year. Jimmy Dore's tour agent is handling our tour, and further details will be confirmed. So I wish no ill at all on the people of the United States, but they do have to lose, and I think many of them have, many more than ever before, have lost the wish to dictate what happens in every corner of the world in everybody else's country. They don't get to pick the government of South Africa. For example, to give the latest example, I'm looking now on social media, they've launched an all-out political offensive against the government of South Africa in defense of the right of 7% of the population of South Africa to own 70% of the land and capital of South Africa. You know, apartheid never really ended. The most vulgar, brazen aspects of it. Blacks can piss there, whites have pissed there. Black people can marry that woman, but not that woman. You can get the curls on your hair measured to see if you're black, colored, or white. They'll measure your nostrils to see what race you are. All of that is gone. But 7% of the population of South Africa still owns 70% of the land and capital in the country. And because at a very, very slow pace, the South African government is trying to bring some semblance of equity, of balance to that situation, Donald Trump and Elon Musk have launched all-out war against them. The United States cannot control what happens in Mexico and will not be allowed to control what happens in Mexico. And ditto in Canada. Never thought I'd have to ride to the rescue of Canada and the Canadians, but King Charles will not allow you, President Trump, to absorb a country of which he remains the head of state, unless you want to go to war with us. Will Trump own Gaza? Yes, 9%, 15, 11, and 10. No, 91, 85, 89, and 90. Now, in the last hour, you have been generously donating on the new MOATS website. So a big thank you to Emily Franco, Jafar Sani, and James Arkuzewski. Now go and have a look now, why don't you, on moats.tv. You can watch the show live there, see all the clips from our interviews there, watch my monologues in full. By the way, my monologue on Wednesday night would appear to have been the most viewed monologue I have ever given. So if you haven't watched it yet, you better catch up on it. But the donate button is everywhere on the site. Please click on it and give anything that you can. Let's return to London, where Simon wants to talk about Ukraine. Go ahead, Simon.
Hello, George. Hope you're well, buddy. Yeah, tonight I want to talk to you about one of the great mysteries of the world today, in the modern day, certainly. Right up there with Stonehenge, Roswell landings, the Loch Ness Monster, and why people still listen to Angela Rayner. The issue is Russia Today. Yes, Russia Today, that evil, mind-controlling, democracy-destroying propaganda outlet that we were told that our noble, all-knowing British government banned in 2022. Well, last year I started watching it again. It's back. No VPN, no backdoor trickery. You can just click and watch it. Now, this is very confusing, George, because if you remember, just 2 years ago, our government assured us that Russia Today was basically Voldemort with a news desk. Watching it even by accident could cause severe side effects like questioning government narratives, or heaven forbid, thinking for yourself. So naturally, they had to protect us because, let's be honest, we're clearly too stupid to decide what's real and what's not nonsense, what's not real, you know? That's why we need government to do the thinking for us. And yet, here we are in 2025, and RT is back. No announcement, no fanfare, just a quiet whoopsie-daisy from the same people who banned it. Almost like they'd rather pretend it never happened. Now, why would they do that, I wonder? Could it be, I don't know, because banning Russia Today in the first place was a childish, stupid, knee-jerk reaction that made Britain look like a fragile dictatorship? Or maybe, just maybe, because the government finally realizes it's lost the Ukraine war but can't publicly admit it. I mean, let's just think about it, George. They told us Ukraine was winning. They told us sanctions would cripple Russia, and recently we're learning that they were hoping that it would overthrow Russia, but overthrow Putin, but it hasn't. They told us that we had to suffer for the greater good. Sky-high energy bills, which unfortunately our pensioners are suffering, inflation and everything. And now Ukraine is out of manpower. Zelensky is being sidelined, and NATO's muttering things like, well, we tried. But rather than just admit they got it all horribly wrong, they simply remove the ban and hope no one notices, you know? And this is why
Simon, first of all, what a good call. I'm glad you made it. I did not know that you could now get RT again. I hope you haven't given the game away and now they'll make sure it's switched off again. I did not know that, and it would probably be a criminal offence for me to encourage people to go look for it, but everyone will have heard what you said. Listen, RT was a voice. You had a multitude of voices. Unfortunately, most of the others were all saying the same thing. But the natural reaction of a thinking person is to want to hear more than one side of the story. Most people know when they're being shoveled propaganda. Most people know when all the outlets on the western side of the argument are all shooting the same breeze. It's probably a wise idea for a normal thinking person to seek out the other person's point of view. And by depriving our own public, not just in Britain, but throughout the Western world, of that alternative point of view, well, that's been as successful as all the other sanctions. All the other sanctions, as this undereducated, left school at 16, factory worker was able to predict, these sanctions will not just not work, they will boomerang. I described the sanctions on Russia at the beginning of this conflict as the biggest boomerang in history. And I was proved absolutely right, as every overeducated Oxbridge pundit, from The Economist to the Financial Times to, more softly, the popular prints, is already now admitting that Russia is booming, Britain is sinking. The Western European economies have wrecked themselves. And by cutting off an alternative point of view, criminalizing the watching of it, the working for it, the writing for its website. Criminalizing these things did not achieve the stated results and achieved precisely the same as the other sanctions did. So what can I say? You'd be better putting me in charge of Britain's foreign affairs. And if I was in charge of Britain's foreign affairs, as opposed to David Lammy, take your pick, me or David Lammy, if I was, I'd stop the war with the world. I would position Britain as a neutral country, a bridge between East and West, able to sail the 7 seas, bringing amity and harmony in international relations. Automatically allies with none and automatically enemies of none. A genuinely independent British foreign policy whose principle was, is this act good for the British people first and foremost? That's what I call sovereignty. It's what I call independence. It's why I fought for Brexit. It's why I opposed the breakup of Great Britain. That ship called Britain could, with dignity, take its place in the world and make use of the dwindling remaining assets that we have. And we do have them. The language, the culture, the Made in Great Britain label are still worth something in the world. But it's a wasting asset. By placing ourselves as the tail of the American empire dog, we're making people everywhere hate us. And in the end, when everybody hates you, nobody wants to be your friend, and you're not powerful enough to engender fear, as the United States can do, you, my friend, are up the Yangtze without a paddle. Thanks, Simon, in London on Ukraine. Paul Rettig says USAID is a black ops slush fund. Absolutely, obviously. What's her name? Clinton, the daughter. Not Hillary, but I forget her name. Miss Clinton. Chelsea, how could I forget it? They went out the cup yesterday. Chelsea Clinton got $84 million from USAID. 3 million of it she spent on her own wedding. Millions of it she spent, I think 11 millions, on a fabulous villa. How? Why? Why was she given American taxpayers' money on that level? I mean, I could spend the next 24 hours going through the list of USAID from a transvestite opera in Bangladesh, millions, to 20 millions on Sesame Street for Iraqis. I mean, it's comic if it weren't so tragic for the public in the United States, who still, in some places, don't have clean water, who in North Carolina are still living in tents, and who in many, many parts of the country are living with crumbling infrastructure all around them. One of my favorite Americans is Donna. She's in Panama and wants to talk about Palestine. Go ahead, Donna.
Hi, George. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you for your guests. They were both fabulous. I'm going to listen a second time.
Brilliant.
I have been sitting here like a good little schoolgirl making notes, and I can tell you I wanted to address Mr. Abdel Bari Atwan's question. Why do they hate us Arabs? Now, I want to tell you it's in several parts. One, let me explain something. He probably knows this, and you certainly do. But first of all, we don't all hate you. In fact, I love you. I love the Arab world. I am totally and thoroughly in your camp. But let me explain. Americans are a young country, right? The American United States of America, compared to Palestine or Lebanon, it's a young country. And people who came to the United States were immigrants, so there's still kind of an immigrant mentality. And they're very entrepreneurial, very materialistic, and I think the way they think is, well, if you're in a place where there's an occupying power or any power with massive military superiority, and there's a choice of either you get subjugated and occupied for the rest of your lives, or get blown away. Well, hey, power comes out of the barrel of a gun, I think, as Mao said. So Americans would just say, why don't they just move? Sort of like Trump, we'll build them such nice houses, they won't want to leave. That's the mentality of America. They don't understand it. They don't understand being so deeply and passionately rooted to a country, to the earth. They don't understand that maybe some of these Palestinians' grandfathers and great-grandfathers and great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers have been tilling the soil of Palestine with their olive groves for 1,000 years. And that it's an affront to them, the idea of, well, just pack up and move and buy a nice condo in Jordan or in Saudi Arabia. They don't think like that. And Americans don't understand that other people don't think like they do. That's one thing. Then the Jewish Zionists especially have controlled the narrative for over a century. If you see in TV, in Hollywood, there's documentaries about this. One is called Real, R-E-E-L, Bad Arabs. Another is called something, I think, Valentino.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've got the book, actually.
Yeah, I mean, all the Arabs are always terrorists or bad guys. The Jews are always good guys or victims. So this is deeply, deeply, deeply embedded into the consciousness of most Americans. And if you try to educate them, they will shun you. They will push you out. And I have been such a victim. I've been shunned and pushed out by people I grew up with, by my own family, and they're all afraid of getting fired from their jobs. My niece is afraid to receive an email from me, received at work, that was celebrating peace in Palestine amongst various Christian and Jewish and Muslim. She was afraid of her career suffering. This is the situation. That's it.
Well, that's the most, you've made many important calls to the show, but that's the most powerful one that you have ever made. And the complete inability of important sections of the American public, and particularly its leadership, who are, let's face it, people from anywhere. They live a life completely unrelated to the life of the mass of the American people. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is a billionaire, and she's been in public life for half a century. How does that happen? The fact that they live the lives that they do mean that they don't understand the love of the land, the love of the country, the love, you said that for generations after generations, their grandparents had been plowing that land. That's true. And their olive trees are sometimes 1,000 years old. That's also true. But the graves of their ancestors are there. Now, the graves of the ancestors of most people in America are not in America. Their lands lie far away, and the bones of their ancestors lie far away. But the Palestinians are living on land that they have lived on for thousands of years, and their entire family history is there. And that tree that was planted by your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is of far more importance to you than any material price that you could name. Otherwise, Trump could buy them all out. He could send Kushner there with a checkbook and sit down with every Palestinian family and bargain with them give them a price to leave, but they're not like that. They are, the Palestinian people are not that kind of people. And that's going to have to be learned by those that are trying to make dispensations that simply will not work and which are in any case intellectually and morally bankrupt. Thank you very much, Donna, for that very powerful call from Panama. Now, you know that every Monday I go to London to make Have It Out with Galloway, and it goes out at 7 o'clock on Tuesday evenings. You can be on the show, in camera, on the video wall, and I want you to be. Watch this promo. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Be on the studio wall. Participate in the debate about the greatest issues of our time. This is the place where we tackle the world's biggest problems and offer some of the world's best answers. You can have your say. Write to me at our website at haveitoutwithgalloway.com and join me here in the studio audience.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
By the way, because tomorrow is Monday and I make long train journeys on Mondays, I'll be chatting live to my supporters on patreon.com. Patreon.com/George Galloway. Last Monday we had such a powerful and large conversation that some people were appealing to stop the pinging. I didn't know what they meant, but it turned out that every person who sent a message or I replied to was causing a pinging on their phone. I'll try and work out a way that that cannot happen. But if you want to join me in live chat tomorrow, Monday, then you can do it by following me and supporting me on patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, this is the moment I've been waiting for, and I think many of you have. It's Gayatri with the social media roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Let me first say that on tomorrow's show of Have It Out with Galloway, we will be joined by Wyatt Reed of The Grey Zone.
Oh, he's really good. Yeah, he's terrific.
Yes, wonderful. So Jane Walklin loved your monologue and says that I hope they join the dots in the US and the UK. It's not as if you haven't given them the true picture. You have been. And I think, Jane, that they are taking notes somewhere in the White House, somewhere in Downing Street. And Ijaz from Glasgow says, we watch your program regularly and much appreciate you for raising your voice for Palestinians and workers. I have studied the functioning of law of acquittal in detail, and let me say that you are part of its functioning. Firstly, you are acting as a warner. And secondly, you are holding evil accountable. You may have noticed that the events are now accelerated. The world is changing fast, which is good news for the common people. Isn't it that they said...
Yeah, well, I'm grateful for that. Our audience is, I think, a record audience tonight. So more and more people are switching on to this source of alternative truth. We believe it's the authentic and genuine truth, but whether you believe that or not, it's a good idea to hear our side of the story. And more people are switching onto that. So I'm grateful for those compliments. Sorry, Gayatri. What else have you got?
Well, in line what he said about the workers and the common people and us just coming from a whole weekend of the Special Congress of the Workers' Party, I wanted to read you the email that Elaine sent in. It's quite a long one, so I'm sorry, Elaine, I had to shorten it. She says, Britain is broken. It's trashy, it's filthy, it's poor, it's scruffy, it's unhealthy, it's damaged. And I could go on. I'm in A&E in Brighton at the moment for the second time as my husband has severe back pain, and I'm witnessing heartbreaking poor people here. I'm furious that we are called one of the richest countries in the world. Our fascist government has an agenda, I believe. They despise the working class with venom, and we feel and we know it. In Brighton, the homeless are still in doorways and have been for 40 years. I feel we are no better off than the Victorian times. So I am going to invest in a second-hand camera and take black and white photos of Dysponian Britain and enlarge them for displays around the UK. I may even take pictures of the wealthy and the grand homes of the rich, just to put the contrast together. It's time we spoke up and showed the people what is really going on. Starmer is no different to Trump. The Israel lobby obviously controls him and so much in the UK. So she's asking whether you would like to support her endeavor, not financially. And she says, she finalizes by saying, I now wish we were more socialist in order to share wealth fairly.
Well, that's very powerful. Of course, we'll support her. We'll showcase her photographs. We'll circulate them and try and get as many people as possible. It's a very good idea. I don't think we are as poor as we were in Victorian times, but we are definitely going backwards. The country and the weather doesn't help. The country is as shabby and broken down as I have ever known it. And I've been around in Britain since the 1950s. A good friend of ours, Yasser, was making the point, wasn't he, just last night, that anybody who's got money, sufficient money to leave, anyone who's got a skill set which is valuable overseas, transferable skill set, is leaving the country to places like Dubai, places like Kuala Lumpur, places in the east or places in the south of Europe. You and I were in Naples just the other day, and we met British people there who've just left because things are so bad in Britain now. And the worst thing about them is that we have a government in which nobody has any confidence at all. You know, you can endure bad times. The British people have done many times, endured bad times, but they had hope that those bad times would come to an end and that they had a political leadership that had an idea of how to get out of the trouble that we were in. But nobody believes that. Nobody, really nobody, not even his own wife, believes that Keir Starmer has any idea of how to get Britain out of the mess that we are in. I'll tell you bluntly, there's only two reasons why, because let's face it, you and I are exactly the kind of people who could leave. I can't leave for two reasons. One of them banal. I love the football here. I think we've got the best football in the world here, and I would feel torn from it. But the second reason is I feel I have an obligation to try and offer an alternative to the British people as to how we manage our way out of these crises, multiple crises, social crises, economic crises, cultural crises, urban crises, rural crises, international affairs crises. We have to, I feel anyway, an obligation to my own people, amongst whom I was born, whose language I speak, whose literature I love, whose culture, from the Beatles and the Kinks and the Stones right back to Shakespeare,
2100 hours.
I feel I have an obligation to stay and offer an alternative. And that is what I am doing. Gayatri, I'm sorry, I've got to go now, but I promise I'll take you for chips right after this show. Because I've got to take a call from a legend. A legend whom I hope you're going to see much more of on the Mother of All Talk Shows. That legend is Erobos in New York. The last word of the evening. Erobos, welcome to the show.
A salubrious late evening to you, your family, your wonderful MOATS, the wonderful guests. Diana Panchenko I'm still getting over her commentary. She touched on everything I've been thinking about when it comes to Ukraine. Yep. The fantastic MOATS staff, Chaya, of course, and the fashionista intellectual, which is Mrs. Gayatri Galloway, in her neoclassical Korean look. She does great lengths to represent all of the Asian cultures every week. She's by herself. She's stellar. I wanted to mention something. I've been watching on MOATS, but I still watch MOATS TV, but I still switch back to YouTube to view the comments. And I had an idea, and I don't know, this is probably technical, very technical to accomplish, but not impossible. If there is a way to bring all of the comments, like say, for instance, there are people commenting on Rumble, there are people commenting on Twitch TV, on Getter, on different streams. If there was a way to unify these comments on MOATS TV and maybe put a header, like say, but that would say like RU would be Rumble or TW would be Twitch, a header to each comment, so that would show that where different people are watching from all the different platforms, Twitter and such. Maybe it could be color coded. I know it could be done, even though it's very technical. Because I personally would want to watch it on MOATS TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just something to consider.
If it can be done, we'll do it. Yeah.
Fantastic. On to, because time is always against us. On to Mr. Bari Atwan. I know I butchered his name. He mentioned, and I appreciate what's her name, Donna from Panama. I appreciate her insight there.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I'm glad she was able.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was glad she was able to bring some mollification and a compromise in her dealings with Trump over the canal. So shout out to Donna. The West Bank, the issue with the West Bank, and what he mentioned about why they hate us. Well, it goes back to a point that you have mentioned, and I didn't look up who the original author was, about children of a lesser God, right? That's what it comes down to. They hate, the Arabs are like the new South Africans. They're like the new black people, right? They're like the new people, the indigenous people over there in Australia, right? They just transferred that same hatred and that same racial animus in order to justify what they're doing, to justify their crimes. And unfortunately, many people, they buy in, they subjectively internalize that narrative because they want to believe it. They want to believe the Arabs are inferior, just like they wanted to believe black people are also inferior. And many of the black people buy into this foolishness as well. Right? They buy into the same, because they want to be Americans so bad. They fought in all the wars. They went through Jim Crow. They do everything the white Anglos tell them to do, and they're still not considered a full citizen even right now. But they want to be so bad, and so they say, okay, it's the pecking order. So they don't hate us as much. The Arabs are the new black people. Let's hate them too. And of course, I'm not saying it's like that with everyone. It's definitely not like that with myself. I'm not American anyway. However, I just wanted to mention that. As far as the West Bank, when I was in the shelter system, I viewed it as the house of silver linings. For even if it's one particular thing in that whole chaotic cesspit of filth and insanity and degradation, there was always one thing I took away that was beneficial. And for me, and this is horrible, of course, but this is just the reality of what I'm seeing. The West Bank, if it's going to be bombed and destroyed like Gaza, we already know the Palestinian Authority is working with the Zionist scoundrels. They are the Uncle Toms and the Uncle Thomasenas of Palestine. Well, then people are going to join Hamas or the resistance, Al-Quds force and all of that in droving numbers. So which means it's going to be they're going to bring Hamas into the West Bank. I think they're already there. But I think they're going to join in that number in massive numbers because people don't want to be extinguished. People don't want to be murdered. People don't want to sit there and watch their kids be destroyed and then say, okay, I'm just going to pray about it and that's it. People are getting tired of that foolishness. You know, they want to fight. They have to fight. They're not given any other option. So I just wanted to share these thoughts, and I'm thankful as always for the mother of all talk shows.
Well, we're more thankful to you for the regular shafts of light, of wisdom that you bring from across the ocean to us. And we have big plans and big hopes for our ongoing relationship. The way you talked there made me remember, you've heard me say before, Erebus, my mother says that she knew I was not like other boys because I was always on the side of the Indians. I wanted Custer to be slaughtered on that hill at the Little Bighorn. I wanted the Native Americans, as they are more properly described, to successfully defend their land from the white European colonial settler invaders. Savages. The savages were the white European colonial invaders. We were brought up to believe that the Indians scalped people, but they learned how to scalp people from the European settler colonial invaders of their land. They were given promises, like the Oslo Agreement, that they would have a piece of land to call their own and to call by the name of their ancient homeland, Palestine. But it was a lie, just like all the lies that were told to the Native American people by the European settler invaders, who savagely assailed them, annihilated them, and in the end virtually extinguished them from the face of the earth, leaving a sorry band of people on tiny, barren pieces of land, which became a byword for alcoholism and sickness and obesity and all the other curses that have been visited upon the Native American people. You can call me romantic if you like, but I will always be on the side of the Comanche, of the Apache, of the Dakota people, of the Sioux people. I'll always be on their side. I will always lament what happened to them. The fact that I'm talking in this way and that virtually nobody in the United States would give a moment to consider that I might be right, that the savagery was the opposite of what they had been brought up to believe, that the mass extinction, virtually, of the Native American people, all the way from the cone of Chile all the way to the north of Canada, the virtual extinction of almost 100 million people, killed by barbarism, by the diseases brought and in some cases deliberately inflicted upon the Native American people, the poverty, the destruction of the buffalo herd, and all the other ways in which 100 million people nearly were annihilated, were holocausted, is something that I believe deep in my heart. You can bury my heart at Wounded Knee. But as you were talking, I saw these similarities. Donald Trump could be General Custer. He could be the man who made the false promises. And he could be the man who leads everybody into one big, mighty, disastrous little bighorn. Sorry if that's all a bit off the subject, but it's all the time that we've got left for, unfortunately, and I have to take my good wife for chips, not computer chips or casino chips or potato crisps, but real English chips. So I hope that you'll join me again. First of all, if you're on Patreon, on the live chat, tomorrow from the train, on Tuesday night for Have It Out with Galloway, and on Wednesday at 7 o'clock for the big show. Have It Out with Galloway on Tuesday, the mother of all talk shows on Wednesday. See you then, God willing.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.